And good evening, everybody. It's Thursday night, and that means it's time for the Thursday Night Trio with Professor Hamamoto, George Webb, and myself. And we are so glad that you joined us tonight here in the chat room, or even if you're just watching without participating, we're glad you're here. I see Professor's got some new books in his hand, and he's very happy with. And boy, it's all about George Webb's. The incredible drama that you've been going through, George. I mean, I don't think anybody could write a story like you've been put through. Bring us up to date and tell us how the book sales are going.
Book sales are great. We sold out the first 100 of the Corona Roadshow that Dr. Hamamoto put up. We sold another 200, another 100. Then we did the second book, which was George Webb versus CNN. We sold 100 of those really quickly. And that's kind of our, print. That's a lot of time in front of the printer. And then the third one now is this DARPA to Wuhan book, and that's selling well as well. So we're up to about 90 copies of that. But we've done 3 printings, 3 editions, signed originals in July so far. So that's ahead of schedule.
And folks, to get the books will contact you where?
Neighborhood News Studio, and you just click the button, the yellow button, and you buy the books that way. $30 for each book and $7 shipping. And it's better you buy all of them at once because then you save on shipping.
All right, and certainly you've gone a long time, George, without things like your Patreon, your super chats, your YouTube, everything. So it's been a long time coming, but I think you're having some success here. At least I hope that you're at least paying for the printers and the ink.
Oh yeah, well, Deep Virginia gave us the printers. We had different people donate paper and ink. So we're sitting pretty right now, and we're a fine oiled machine. We had volunteers come from all over the country to help print books. So they saw book making up close. So this has really been fun, and it's only been 22 days in, and we're going to do our 4th printing next week. So there you go.
Thank you, George. And Professor, I know you're working on some new publication or publications. You mentioned a series. Is it okay to talk about that?
Sure. I'm going to be doing the Collegiate Gothic series, and I'm going to be looking at the root of great institutional evil that has cast a pall upon the land and even the world, and that is the medieval institution known as the university. You got your law schools there, you got your medical schools, you got your graduate programs. It's all one-stop shopping of evil. And speaking of which, I would like to spend with your permission, of course, John, most of today, our meeting today, devoted to a skull session, so far as George Webb's case is concerned, because I want to do what I can to make sure that he's going to be able to print more books, start more schools, finance more charrettes at the expense of one Jeff Zucker and CNN. And I think I have a novel approach to really mess with their minds, because I agree with you, George, and I'll let you respond to this. I agree with you, George, that the Dershowitz model is not going to work. I read this book. Is this what you're referring to today, this morning?
Yeah.
I read it.
Yeah. I'm all ears. Tell me.
Yeah, no. I think you're spot on, and that really got me going when you said Dershowitz is not the way it's going to. It's just empty proceduralism, right? All the citations. John, I know that's part of the legal scholarship. It's all about precedents and all that. But I think in order to prevail in this situation, I do agree this is going to be a landmark case. And I'm also going to propose a way how to make sure it becomes a landmark case in promoting it in a certain way. So please remind me if I forget. But I think the method it was just providential. I think it surfaced earlier in this week when the magic term semiotics came up. I think a semiotics approach rather than a legalistic procedural approach is going to get the attention of the judge. It's going to, I don't know if it's going to go to jury or not. And this is how it's going to become a constitutional landmark case. It's going to get the attention of the heretofore silent, except in the case of Alan Dershowitz. It's going to get the attention and the involvement and the participation of the entire legal scholarship profession. Because guess what? One of their big areas of research is in jurisprudence, the semiotics of jurisprudence. So you can get someone like the emeritus professor of Harvard Law School, Duncan Kennedy, who's taught a course in it, to weigh in on this and to write articles about it, legal scholarship. And it's going to enter the language. It's going to enter into the political culture. And importantly, on a strategic level, it's going to be a cudgel. Remember last week we had the shillelagh? It's going to be a cudgel that'll win the day. That's my proposal for today.
Well, I took up your proposal in my response to the motion to dismiss, which was a very semiotic response. Thank you, Norma. Norma, that's a very semiotic donation that I just got.
Oh,
but speaking of total sensory immersion, but I took your pathway with semiotics. It could have been a very procedural response, but I said I want to go with a narrative response. I want to tell the story. I don't want to be legalistically, bound in a little box. I'm going to tell the judge what really happened in as quickly and as briefly as I can, but not lose the color and timbre and tenor of the case. And so I tried to do that. And so the response is in. And, CNN does need a calendar. They don't understand October 2020. It wasn't more than a year ago. So that's a problem they had. And they don't understand continuous and aggressive and adverse and continuous nature of slander and libel per se when you put it on your website. So I think we're on good ground. This judge has been very, I like semiotics because it appeals to all your senses and that you can holistically evaluate something rather than just look at something in a kind of a very legalistic way. And I think this judge has that. I don't have a whole lot of feedback from him yet, but he seems to want this to come to light, which I love.
Good. When he hears that magic word, and if you drop some citations from some of the law journals, his ears are going to perk up, because he will become part of the history as well, right? Just like Thurgood Marshall, right? Board versus the Brown of the Board of Education, right? Later became a Supreme Court justice. So this is all part of sort of the mini strategies that I think are going to be necessary in order to prevail. But I'm so gratified that you weren't going to just be proceeding on, those little citations they put in the law journal articles. Oh, it's mind-numbing, it's deadening, and worst of all, it's not effective. The semiotic approach, and there's an article sitting right in front of me. It's published in the Washington University Law Review, 2006. It's written by a law scholar, Sonia K. Cattell, and the article is titled "Semiotic Disobedience." So you got civil disobedience. You got civil disobedience, right? That won the day. That won. Everybody said that's not going to win. That's a loser. And we got semiotic disobedience. George, this is a winner. You're going to be able to buy all the ink and paper that your heart desires.
Yeah, well, I've had a good teacher and mentor with McDuff, and he never gave me legal advice. Let's be clear about that. But I was able to watch him up close for 4 years, and how he would dismantle and dissemble these cases. And so let's just say, as friend of friend in polite conversation that had no legal bearing whatsoever, we had a good discussion or two.
Excellent. And there are textbooks that are being published, such as this one by Jan M. Broekman. The title is The Semiotics of Law in Legal Education. So you're going to have a whole new generation of people, just like they got, and of course they turned it against us eventually with critical race studies, right, and all that stuff. I'm talking about civil rights legislation from the mid 50s to the 60s, right? So we can circumvent that and just push in the CME. That's going to get a lot of young legal scholars energized and still not keep their jobs, right? Because I think that's one of the reasons for the timidity. They do not want to speak out against the political orthodoxy that's been pushed through the university. And of course, that just leaves people like Alan Dershowitz an open field.
Yeah, I think Dershowitz may have played out his usefulness with, corner case law. There's no one obviously more schooled in all the case citations and whatnot, but I'll leave it to McDuff to talk about arguing the law versus arguing the case. But I do think that you do tend to go to the citations and go to the little codicils and corners when you don't have the facts in your favor. And this is a case where they immediately went to grasping at these little corner case straws rather than talking about the facts of the case,
right?
Which is a very good sign early on for me and for the case.
Excellent. Just drop some of these citations like a guide to semiotic reading of incitement of hatred in modern criminal justice. So it's becoming part of the language now. And the judge will feel that he doesn't want, he's got assistants, right? Probably law students who are interning or newly minted one. They're all going to be energized behind this case. It's not just going to be just sort of a sleepy time, right? Routinized sort of dispensing of justice. They'll understand the importance of the case that you're presenting to them.
Well, I will say this: typical First Amendment defenses for news outlets have given a fairly wide latitude to anything goes, but there is this new kind of pendulum swing coming back to talking about responsibility in journalism, the fact that you just can't twist everything to a 1984 180-degree meaning, and there has to be some responsibility in the reporting. And I do like this reasonable man concept where, hey, you said George Webb wished harm. In actual fact, George Webb was being threatened. That's a 180-degree spin on the truth. We're going to have some measure of responsibility now, right? And that's a new thing, I think, in the legal thinking. And we're testing that new ground, as you said. But I like the appeal to the common man, the appeal to the common juror as just common sense. You can't say, George jumped in the lake, therefore George is insane, and withhold the fact that George was going to save an animal or George was going to save a human. It just makes George sound bad when he jumps in the lake. If you leave out key information like he was going to save someone from drowning, you've totally contorted the true meaning of the story. When you knowingly and willingly knew those key facts and you deliberately withheld them, now you have the culpability. And when you do it continuously and aggressively and adversely over time, you indict the company, you indict Jeff Zucker and CNN. And so that's the landmark. This is the Responsibility in Journalism Act, if you will. Landmarkness. That's the landmark part of the case. And hopefully it'll establish precedent for hundreds and hundreds of people who've been treated in a similar way.
Counselor?
Well, I enjoyed that conversation very much, and I learned a great deal of it. While you were talking, I went to look up what is semiotics because I didn't know. I didn't know the word. before today. You're applying it to legal strategies since, probably has arisen since last time I tried a case was in 2008. So that's a that's a long time. So I don't I don't have any experience with this approach, but I'm delighted to hear about it. And because I think what I see you're doing there is what one the first lawyer I ever worked for was famous for one saying that he'd always give you if I'd turn in a legal he'd say, give me a legal brief on this subject or something. And the one criticism was get to the meat of the nut. Get to the meat of the nut. And that's what George is doing. He's just saying, look, I mean, there's all kinds of window dressing that we can throw here. But the meat of the nut is, in this case, that it's a continuing tort. It doesn't stop on the first day. And although the first day was before the 1 year statute of limitations, which is kind of a surprise if you're not a lawyer, you don't know that it's on 1 year statute. Most statutes are 2 or 3 years. But anyway, that is the facts as we have them. The lawsuit is filed, but the the problem continues up to if I remember correctly, the most recent one or the latest one was October of 2020, which is clearly within the last year. So I think you've got a case that the judge is going to want to help you with, as you say, and what you can do now is you can take all of those legal citations, if you have the time, and take a look at them, because I'm thinking there's probably like a basic foundation of language that has to go into a complaint for defamation of character or however you're faced it. I haven't read your complaint, by the way, just so everybody knows this, but it may be that there's some technicalities that you didn't cross your T's or put enough, specific language in, and that you can fix that. You can ask the judge, can I have leave to file an amendment? But we don't know. I wouldn't know what the defects are without reading your pleadings. But the idea is that the judge wants to do justice, as you say. That's the whole foundation, is that we have parties. One side argues their case and the other side argues their case. But the judge is under a solemn duty. That's why we call them Your Honor, because they have this sacred honor duty to speak the truth and to make the judgments that are in accordance with the law and the facts. So I'm really sympathetic to the idea that you're going to win this. I'm a Michigan lawyer, and just for the record, you and I talked a couple of years ago about that. Just to be clear, that I'm not representing George Webb, but I love George Webb, and I want him to win this thing. So if I can talk to him off the record and contribute anything, you're damn right I will. I want George to be super successful, and I want everybody to know it, because this is a tremendous opportunity to educate the people of the country and the world of what's really going on behind the scenes. So enough out of me. I want to hear more from you guys.
Well, I was glad to hear that George is not just going for the legal victory, but he's going for history. He wants to win a historical landmark case, and that's what really excites me. Now, John spoke based on his extensive experience in the courtroom as a trial attorney about the judge. But I think equally as important, maybe even more so, I don't know because I'm not an attorney, is winning the hearts and minds of the clerks, of the law clerks. They're the ones who write the judgments. They're the ones who are right out of law school and saying, how do I apply what I learned in the abstract in the classroom to a living, breathing case? So the semiotics of law is fresh in their minds, and they have an opportunity to apply what they've only been studying in the abstract. So you're going to win that battle too. I think that's where Brown was won. It was one amongst the clerks who all went on to really solid careers in the law themselves. So anyway, I'm trying to think in the most global fashion possible, so far as winning. Right, that's the object here, and not just a moral victory, not just a financial settlement, but a precedent-setting, epical, if you will, if that's not too grand a word or concept, but an epical change or return to the republic of letters that is free discourse, discussion, open argumentation, and pursuing the truth. Not to say that we don't make mistakes on and on, but getting away from the structural corruption that these corporate entities have internalized. They've institutionalized it, and in the process, we're losing the. It hasn't happened yet, but we're in the process of losing the republic.
Yeah, Farmer Jones, who's another attorney, has characterized this in a similar way. He said, really what's on trial here is Smith-Mundt, which is, you know, the CNNs of the world are given full license to just contort everything to their wishes and to whoever their paymasters are. Facts have absolutely no bearing on whatever the, narrative they want to push out. And there you go. And I see this as I agree with you on the clerks. I really do. The clerks that have been here in the Eastern District of Michigan have been, even though I'm in Toledo tonight, have been exceptional and really helpful to me, and really making sure that the pro se nature of my case, obviously representing myself, that I've had every opportunity to get their not advice, but access. And if I do make a procedural error, as John mentioned, which I did, even though I do think there was some contempt and some obstruction that CNN used in order to avoid service, this judge looked beyond that and said, well, you know, despicable practices in avoidance and obstruction of the law and contempt of the law are not going to be rewarded by this court. Even though, you know, if you have an extra space between CT Corporation, who names their company CT Corporation, and if you have an extra space, we're going to call that improper service. Well, this judge basically said, away with this. This is just an artifice, a duplicitous artifice to try to defeat the intent of the court, which is to get to the, like John said, get to the meat of the nut, get to the issue, and argue the facts and the merits of the issue. So far so good is all I can say. With both the clerks, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The clerks are in this as well, because this is a sword that cuts both ways. One day it'll be against a person who is a Bernie supporter like myself, Obama voter. The next day it'll be against somebody who's a Trump supporter. So if you add this responsibility factor where you just can't Smith-Mundt it to your heart's content, it brings back some of the Constitution. I'm not saying it brings back all the Constitution, but it brings back some of it.
I would just add, since it's on my mind, let me just toss this out to you guys. What you're facing right now is a motion to dismiss under Rule 12 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. And the standard there is that the judge has to take as true everything in your complaint, everything that you say in your complaint. He has to assume that is true for the purposes of the motion, unless the defendants come in with an affidavit denying whatever particular part they're denying. So when you frame your complaint, and if you decide to amend it, just keep in mind that you want to put in enough facts, that everything that the judge reads is going to almost be compelling to say, wow, I can't dismiss this case. There's too many facts here that the plaintiff has fairly alleged. Anyway, that's just the general rule that you're looking at is, if you allege it, and they don't specifically deny it with an affidavit, then the judge has to accept it as true, and you should win.
And that's exactly what happened. The CNN did not even deny that these were defamatory statements. The only thing they had denied was that they were over a year ago, and that's clearly false. So I was heartened by the fact that there was no contest. These are defamatory statements, per se libel, per se slander. The only point of law they argued was, well, you didn't pick out a specific quotation. Well, you don't need to pick out a specific quotation in misrepresentation. You don't need to pick out a specific quotation if there is incitement. There was incitement to violence against me. Johnny O'Sullivan knew there was death threats against me, and he continued with incitement and misrepresentation anyway. So we have per se libel, we have per se slander. There's no need to add any additional facts. That's right in my original complaint. I quote per se libel, per se slander. So, I think the judge sees this as, hey, you didn't come back with anything challenging his allegations. So we're moving to trial. And I think as we start moving to trial, we're going to be able to pick up attorneys a lot more. They're going to say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't just a moot. Maybe hope someday there'll be a trial. We're moving to trial. So we'll definitely be able to bring in an attorney at some point here. We'll class action this. There's 7 other plaintiffs in this as well. I let the judge know that there was 7 affidavits in support, that I had no intention of even talking about this issue when this came up at our charrette. So this will all develop. I obviously can't represent myself as I can't represent the class. I need an attorney to represent the class. And then we've got great lawyers who are willing to come in as pro hac vice to do depositions and interrogatories and all the pre-work before you actually get to trial. So we're getting pretty down far in the well here, but we've thought about it, and we're starting to look at attorneys now here in Michigan.
Good, and I'm sure there'll be some good-hearted attorneys there that will be happy to be associated with this important case.
Excellent.
So
maybe we can pivot away from my case. I feel a little.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me mention that I took my wife, drummer, my great partner, downtown on her birthday on July 20th. We had lunch at the Old Ebbett Grill with Andy. With Andy Craig, the great author of Presidential Puppetry, and a man that George Webb introduced me to about 3 years ago, and Andy and I just kind of hit it off. So we've been in contact since then, and he's been just a terrific resource for me thinking about my book and what to do in terms of publishing it. So, but the occasion was my wife's birthday, and we had originally planned to go to the National Press Club for lunch, but when we got there, they told us that you can't go in there unless you have a vaccination. You have to have a card that and well, we turned around and left, and that's why we went to the Old Ebbett Grill, which was wonderful. I was really probably happier there than I would have been at the Press Club, but I wanted to show it to my wife, because she hadn't been there before, and with her history in radio, it would have been neat. But wow, that's serious. This is the National Press Club. You see Andy there with his Andy talks with his hands, and caught them moving there. Well, anyway, and you can see it's really a lovely, beautiful venue with the drapes and flag drapes and everything. Very, very nice. Everything's, the old mahogany features. And you should see the bar. The bar is one of the classic bars in Washington. Anyway, my point is, the Press Club itself is going along with the narrative. what what kind of a press is that goes along that just, okay, the narrative is that everybody has to have a vaccine card now. So yeah, okay, we're down with that. I, I don't I don't understand what kind of a free press are we talking about here? That it's just so ironic to me that the guardian of our liberties, the press, itself, and not just any press, but the National Press Club, the Sarah McClendon place, the place where countless important speeches have been made. And well, I was kind of just taken aback by that and starting to. And Andy made the comment. He said it's just going to be everywhere. It's just going to keep getting. You're not going to be able to go anywhere unless you have a vaccine card. And it's just seeing freedom slipping away, and then everybody talking now about, well, everybody. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. They've had McConnell out there preaching for everybody needs to get everybody needs the vaccine. Everybody needs the vaccine, and I, I don't know. I think a question of whether you need a vaccine or not is something your doctor and you should talk about, not your senator. But that's just my opinion. But wow, I mean, if they're doing another lockdown this fall, it could be the worst lockdown yet. It could be even worse than what we've experienced for the past 2 years. Um, what do you guys hear about? Are people talking about it? And is it inevitable that we're all going to be locked down again in the fall? I hate to be pessimistic, but it sure does look like that with the messages that are coming out constantly. That unless they get like 99% of us to have taken the what, that they're going to lock us down again. I don't know. I just maybe there's no answer, but I'm looking at it with a jaundiced eye of look what they've done to us the past 2 years.
Mhm.
The other thing, July 20th was 2 years ago exactly. We were out on the Chester River, George, with you finally chasing down, and I was determined to get you to the Russian retreat, and we got you there. That was quite a day.
Great. Well, I'll let Doctor comment first because there's a siren behind me. So go ahead.
Okay, yes. In order to answer that question, I have to kind of take a circuitous route. What I've been trying to do is I've been doing a epidemiology of institutions, of sick, deathly institutions, and I group them under the larger heading of the United Nations Caliphate, and that would include the WHO and its enforcement arm, NATO. And George and John, as you know by now, after over a year of doing these wonderful trios, I go into the metaphysical area, right? And all the great strategies, these forces, these war forces. You've got the general, that's George. You've got the historian, that's John, and you have the wizard, that's me, right? So I look at the metaphysics of the situation, and I think I came up with something interesting. I think most people in the live stream have heard the name Colonel Michael Aquino. Does that ring a bell, George? Colonel Michael Aquino?
Yeah. With
Well,
the MK and all that. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, but I'm not going to do the typical Aquino rap, right? I checked out what his doctoral dissertation was at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and its title really caught my attention. Dr. Aquino, the guy who's the head of the Temple of Set and also a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army, who is their wizard, because all the militaries have their wizards, right? The Wehrmacht, they had Himmler, and on and on. This is his dissertation. It's called The Neutron Bomb. Now, a pretty interesting doctoral dissertation for a guy who's who's also the head of the Temple of Set and a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. But here is where this is ground zero of the takeover. This was published in the 80s, by the way. It's an old book, but it's valuable for that very reason. But chapter 6 is devoted entirely to NATO, the political sequence. And it was with the neutron bomb. I don't know if anybody remembers this back in the 80s, right? It was with the neutron bomb where the military functions of the United States of America, as well as political, and now we're seeing the health apparatus of the United States of America as a sovereign nation, was handed over to the United Nations Caliphate, which means the WHO and its enforcement arm, the NATO Caliphate. It was the neutron bomb. And George, you've been talking recently about, well, I mean, you go back with yellow cake uranium and all this. We're also heading into the anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and on August 2nd and August 9th, which I'm going to be doing a talk on. I wonder if you can comment then about how this pivotal moment in saying we're going to create a weapon that is based on this notion of, they call it enhanced radiation, ER, enhanced radiation, where you can wipe out populations but leave the infrastructure, pretty much intact. There's that, right? There's the military applications, but it's also signals a departure, a loss of sovereignty at the same time. So I think those are the institutions that we have to look at in order to recover the freedoms that John just discussed. He just cited these as going down the drain, including our own press corps.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think the neutron bomb, the perfection of the neutron bomb, because they kind of gave up on the radiation, they moved to the biological. This coronavirus is the perfection of the neutron bomb, and it is targeted directly at what John was talking about, which is the First Amendment, freedom of the press, and it worked. We let it happen. John just gave us proof that you have no questioning, no counter narrative, no debate, no critics, no counterplay at all. It just, this is the way it is. And this is very unusual in our country's history. There's always usually been a counter group to almost every issue. It's really very unusual in our history. I mean, you go back to copperheads and mugwumps and know nothings. You've had all kinds of radical parties on one issue or another, and this no opposition is permitted. No counter narrative is permitted. You're a terrorist now if you do that. And what I love about Andy's work, even though Andy's a little bit more conservative in his views and probably may not have a problem with the vaccination proof to get into the club, I do agree with John that this is the last bastion. This is the last, when they go through all the ramparts and and they get to the keep, where the treasure is kept. That's the National Press Club. That's the last place. That's the last refuge you could go if you're a Solzhenitsyn or if you're a political prisoner and you come to Washington and you're trying to tell your story. And here we are, you can't question something that wasn't animal tested. You can't question something that wasn't even tested on humans. You just have to go along. And I don't want to spin this back to the lawsuit, but this is kind of, I do think there is this undercurrent that people feel that something's horribly wrong and they need to somehow push back, but they don't quite know how. And I do think that some of these legal scholars are saying, wait a minute, there's got to be some kind of legal test here. Brown versus Board of Education would be a classic because brown babies can't get on the bus, right? Or brown babies can't come into school. That's got to be wrong, right? We don't know how it's wrong, but we just feel that something's wrong here, terribly wrong. And I love that case because it is so, life changing. And I do agree on this whole neutron bomb thing. This has been in the psyche of the controllers for a long time. And I remember right around the Carter era, they found that they still had a lot of structural damage with these things, and they decided to move toward bioweapons. And really, it's been a bioweapon story for the last 40 years now. So, if not us, then who? Really, at this point, if not us, then who to challenge these things with in the courts? What's left? It's not going to come out of the press club. The
Yeah.
all the Washington reporters are now tame little pets. That quickly align and agree. And that's not the history of our country.
No.
Thank goodness we've still got some of the old style reporters like Andy and Wade Madston and Madsen and a number of folks. And we've got young people coming up now. George, you've been mentoring some young folks, trying to get them into it. The Schiller Institute is very big about bringing young people into their movement, and I do believe that young folks are looking for answers and looking for truth, and don't want to be distracted by all this garbage music and the narrative on the radio all the time. But frankly, they're in the firing line of all this narrative oriented media, that they can't avoid it. But I do think that kids are hopeful that they can understand the world, and that they want to contribute to something to improve the world that they see around them. I don't want to let the evening pass without making the connection that Thurgood Marshall, who, as you know, argued the Brown versus Board of Education case in 1954, I believe, then went on to be appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States, started out as a waiter at Gibson Island.
Yes.
And Gibson Island, so the island that we've been so focused on since we started our work together in 2018 with Mark Kulak and Bill Taylor and Mobster and everybody else, Kathy Sue, that have contributed, and Drummer did a lot of research too. That we just really tore that place up, and I'm telling you, it keeps on giving. It keeps on producing more and more connections to events, historical and contemporary, that we need to study. It's a gift that keeps on giving. That when we first studied Gibson Island, that's heads get together and good things happen. Can I ask George about Norfolk? We've been to Norfolk many times. You're well aware of a lot of the stuff that most people are not aware of that goes on down in Norfolk. And now Harry the Greek is reporting that Norfolk, the greatest naval base in the world, is now being turned over to NATO. And do we see that as a problem?
Yeah, I mean, Washington rolls over in his grave, with that one. I'm, just on the other side there, York and the James there, Washington wins the big battle there at Yorktown. And, that kind of is the pivotal moment in our nation's military history to us. I mean, speaking American versus English, I mean, we would all have beautiful English accents if it wasn't for Yorktown. So, I only kid there a little, but John went to school down there in Williamsburg at William and Mary, so he knows the area well. But this is, I mean, you can't quite get any more American as far as our military history than this area. And
Yeah.
right across the way there, you have Eric Prince in North Carolina with his academy and his bastardization of mercenary covert war versus just war that's approved and declared by Congress. So you really have turned the most important centerpiece of American military things that we can be proud of into this hideous kind of contorted, stillborn monstrosity with Blackwater. So I look at that and it's sort of like I'm reminded of that commercial where there's the American Indian looking out and there's just trash all over the highway. There was a commercial in the 70s where you can't believe the turn of events. And that's how I look at the NATO, Carl Bildt and the forces of NATO planning right there as a base of operations in our own country. It's quite amazing. But Harry's reporting is spot on.
That's chilling. It really is. I mean, this is one of the most important Navy bases, and it's right here on the continental United States. With all of this other stuff going on, with that Chinese general buying an airstrip in Texas, and George, you've been reporting on that too. It's another thing, and then Tucker Carlson, as last week, was reporting about how there's all these undocumented aliens that are just coming in, and the military and the border police are being, what do you call the border patrol? They're just being told, hey, there's going to be some undocumented people come through. They just wave them through. Don't make any waves about it. Just let them go. Are we getting inundated with prospective Democratic voters to make sure they control the Congress next time, or is it something more sinister? What do you think?
Well, that airstrip you're looking at is a 7,000 or 8,000. I think it may be more than 8,000 feet, which allows you to land a C-5 or a C-130. And this is a Chinese general that did 400 different concentration camps for the Uyghurs and 1 million people in Western China. I can only imagine why he's building an air base like that so close to where all the Jade Helm exercises were. To me, again, if I see somebody create 400 concentration camps and put 1 million people behind bars, and then they come to my country, I expect him to do it again. I don't know. If he had built a series of window displays on home safety, I would expect him to build another series of window displays on home safety. But he didn't. He put 1 million people behind bars in 400 concentration camps. So there you go.
Professor, just a culture.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, culturally, the getting back to the question that we were discussing a minute ago about when are the American people going to wake up? When are they going to do something? And I think that there's still a blessing in a way, in the way that the European countries are still basically divided between the nobility or the upper classes and the common people. And that the common people over there have a common sense of what their rights are. And when they don't get them, they go out and hit the streets. I mean, Italy, they bang on pots in Spain. And, you've seen the demonstrations. And recently, they're getting very, very big crowds in Italy as well as in Paris, protesting what the president of France and Italy also are now imposing a vaccine passport for you to go to a shopping center or any type of a public gathering. You have to have this passport, just exactly as was demanded of me at the National Press Club 2 days ago. These people are angry. They're out on the streets. They recognize the threat to their liberty. And maybe that's because there's always been a sense of solidarity among the common people in Europe that never really developed in America. That's my thesis.
Well, I would agree. The political culture in America is unique, and maybe that's the perverse side of so-called American exceptionalism. Maybe we have to lose our freedom in order to fight to gain it back. Maybe we have to go that far. I don't know. I'm of the mind though that there's been a collective spell that's been cast on Americans. We are in a state of ensorcelment, and it's going to require a dissipation of this spell. I think there's a supernatural, metaphysical, if you will, component to this that needs to be addressed, and privately, because I know that this is not appropriate for this discussion, but privately, I'm going to go about my own individual strategy in order to break through this. But if we did it on a collective level, I think we have some hope. And I'm afraid I have to agree with John. We are under this collective spell, and we don't seem to have the wherewithal, wherever it comes, our emotional, intellectual, or spiritual wherewithal, to really break through it. I thought maybe that after the sort of the slackening of restrictions on masks and all that, that there might have been some sort of collective, not just sigh of relief, but a collective coming together, so far as saying we're not going to let this happen again. It's not going to go down the same way. But nothing of that sort materialized, and not like we're seeing in Europe right now.
Yeah, I think ensorcelment is the right word. It definitely is. We've all kind of agreed to be in this zombified state of just keep walking. I'm reminded of the 1984 commercials where all the people were, the automatons were just following IBM, and we do need that moment of the girl coming in with the hammer thrower and throwing it through the screen and saying no more. And I'm not sure what that'll be a legal case or whatever, but we're definitely in that same mode. We definitely need that moment. Maybe it'll happen at the Olympics. I think the opening ceremonies tomorrow night. Maybe someone will make that protest gesture on the world stage and say no. I did notice a couple of athletes in the Paralympics say that if they're supposedly 80% of the athletes are vaccinated, but there was an assistant or some kind of helper for the Paralympics athletes, and he said, "No, I'm not going to be vaccinated," and she said, "I won't compete if he's excluded." And so, it kind of reminds me of Tommy Smith and remember and Jones at the '68 Mexico Olympics, where they say no more. I'm reminded of the guy with the shopping bags in front of the tank at Tiananmen Square. I think the world is ready for that one hammer throw through this 1984 screen that gives us all the collective backbone to say no more. I don't know what it's going to be, but I do think the world's ready for it. I think you're right that we are under this collective spell, and it is going to take a catalyzing moment to break us out.
Well, you could be right, George. I think it might happen in Tokyo. But just as a point of fact, I wanted to make, because this is a good measurement of your larger argument about the super spreader event. I read with interest today that the health officials at the Olympics are going to distribute 160,000 condoms, but only after the game is over. Then they'll hand it to you to take home and perhaps use it there. Isn't that kind of weird? What does that say?
I don't think that's nearly enough for my habits. No, I'm kidding.
All right.
I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm saying, it's kind of like, I am at a monastery here. So,
okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's just ridiculous in so many different ways. This reminds me of the American GIs, when they got to Europe after D-Day, and they gave them something like 400 condoms. It's basically saying, well, go out and rape and plunder to your heart's content, but make sure you wear a condom. What's the what is the message there? That's ridiculous.
I remember that sounds to me like an insult to the Catholic Church, because remember this, the Knights of Malta in Southeast Asia um, actually decided to distribute condoms as a means of birth control, um, and the Pope, I think it was Benedict at the time, slapped him down for it. No, you cannot
Right.
distribute condoms, because the the church teaches, that the only reason to have sex is to have is for procreation, and if you're not married, you shouldn't be having sex anyway, so you don't need no condoms. And when you get married, you don't want to interfere, because we need more Catholic kids. We need that nine child family, like Justice um, Scalia had. You know, I think he had 9 kids and didn't interact with any of them ever, because that's the way they were. That's the way he grew up. But that controversy is still, I think, enigmatic of what the heck is going on with religion and the church. They're still trying to control people, but it's just not practical. But passing out condoms, that is so
But
banal.
only after the games are over. They're going to give it to them as part of their goodie bag, I guess, to take back to their home country, along with whatever other vectors that they are carrying with them.
I'll just throw out another oddity. They've made these beds out of cardboard so that they can only support the weight of one person, and they'll collapse with the weight of two.
Right.
And I'm not. They call them the no sex beds.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought
Yeah.
people are sleeping on cardboard boxes and expect to compete tomorrow.
Yeah, and then the gymnasts were saying, "Hey, we only weigh 85 pounds. We have four ways." And it's led to these like Gary Larson type cartoons. It's just Scott Adams. Yeah, there they are. So I don't know what next, but I do want the hammer throw. I'm looking for the Ukrainian blonde Okonis Lure to just climb the thing where she's supposed to light the torch, and she just throws it right through the screen, and Klaus Schwab goes down
right through the jumbotron.
Right through the jumbotron. That's what I want to see tomorrow.
Right on, George.
Everybody in the stand at the same time says, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take it anymore."
It could be a great moment. Sometimes a great notion. You know what I mean? Sometimes a great notion.
Right. I'll be watching live. I'll be watching the opening ceremony live now, George.
Okay. All right, gentlemen.
Remember the magic 5 rings, Professor.
All right. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, George.
Bye. Good night. Thanks, Doctor.
Good night.